Not every empath who makes you uncomfortable is helping you. Maybe it's a coworker who, after one conversation, casually says something like, "You say you're fine with the decision, but you've been avoiding eye contact with me all week." And they're right, and you didn't even know it showed. That can feel electrifying, like finally being understood. Online, two very different personality types get lumped into that same first impression. The Heyoka Empath and the Dark Empath. One disrupts you to heal you. The other disrupts you to use you. Today we're drawing a clear line between them, because confusing the two could cost you a relationship, or worse. Let's start with a fast recap. A Heyoka Empath, a term borrowed from Lakota tradition and blended with modern empath psychology, is described as someone who mirrors your hidden emotions and uses humor or unpredictability to reveal uncomfortable truths, with the underlying intention of helping you grow. A dark empath, on the other hand, is a term used in psychology for someone who combines genuine emotional insight with narcissistic, manipulative, or even psychopathic traits. They don't lack empathy entirely. They simply use it strategically, often to charm, manipulate, or exploit. Both terms exploded online around the same time, often set to the same trending audio, which is part of why people mix them up. So here's the single biggest difference, and it comes down to one word: intent. A Heyoka empath's disruption is, according to the concept, ultimately in service of your growth. It might sting in the moment, but the underlying motivation is connection and honesty. A dark empath's insight into your emotions serves a different master entirely, their own advantage. They read your vulnerabilities not to help you face them, but to know exactly which buttons to press. Psychologically, this echoes research on the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, layered with high emotional intelligence. That combination is what makes dark empaths particularly difficult to detect, because unlike classic narcissists, they can seem deeply attuned and caring, right up until you notice the pattern of how that attunement gets used against you. Researchers separate two things here: cognitive empathy, accurately reading what someone feels, and effective empathy, actually caring about it. Dark empaths tend to score high on the first and selectively low on the second. They understand you perfectly. They just don't always act like it matters. This shows up constantly at work. Think of a manager who always seems to know exactly when you're struggling and checks in at exactly the right moment. And yet somehow, every one of those perfectly timed check-ins ends with you taking on extra work you didn't ask for, out of gratitude for being seen. The read was accurate. What it got used for is the part worth noticing. A lot of the confusion online comes from how both types get described using nearly identical language. They see through your mask. They know your true self. They make you feel exposed. Social media often blurs the two together, partly because ambiguity generates more engagement than a nuanced explanation would. But the overlap in language hides a very real difference in outcome. One type leaves you feeling unsettled but ultimately more self-aware. The other leaves you feeling unsettled and worse off, often without fully understanding why. Because the manipulation was calibrated specifically to your blind spots. So, what are the actual warning signs of a dark empath specifically? They can accurately predict how you'll feel or react, and use that prediction to their advantage rather than yours. Compliments and emotional insight arrive suspiciously in sync with what they want from you. They show real emotional range in private, but conveniently forget empathy the moment accountability comes up. Relationships with them tend to leave you doubting yourself rather than understanding yourself better. And crucially, their insight rarely extends to genuine remorse. They can describe how you feel with startling accuracy, without that understanding translating into changed behavior. Picture a friend who cancels on you last minute for the third time, and when you express frustration, responds with, "I can tell this is really bringing up your fear of being abandoned." Technically accurate, and yet it somehow ends with you comforting them for having such a perceptive read on your childhood, instead of them simply apologizing for canceling. In contrast, someone acting from the Heyoka Empath pattern tends to show a few consistent signs. Their bluntness applies evenly. They're just as likely to call out their own contradictions as yours. There's no personal payoff tied to the truths they surface. If anything, being this direct usually costs them socially. Over time, interactions with them tend to leave you with more clarity about yourself, even if the moment itself was uncomfortable. And their humor, even when sharp, doesn't have a cruel or superior edge to it. It includes you, rather than being used against you. Picture that same canceled plan scenario from a genuinely Heyoka pattern friend instead. Instead of redirecting toward your abandonment issues, they say, "You're right, that was the third time, and honestly, I've been avoiding admitting I overcommitted this month." Blunt, uncomfortable for them to admit. But it closes the loop instead of opening a new one where you're suddenly the one being analyzed. It's worth acknowledging the gray area here, too. Real people rarely sort neatly into one category. Someone can be genuinely growth-oriented with close friends and slip into more self-serving behavior under stress or when there's power on the line, like at work or during a breakup. The goal isn't to permanently label everyone. It's to notice which pattern is showing up right now. In practice, the clearest test isn't what someone says about you, it's what happens after. Ask yourself, after the uncomfortable moment, do you feel more capable of handling your own life or more dependent on this person's approval? Does their honesty ever come with a cost to them, or is it always convenient and directed only at you? Try mentally listing the last 5 honest things they've told you, and ask for each one who actually ended up better off afterward. A pattern usually reveals itself faster than you'd expect. And when you've called out something they did, do they engage with real accountability or redirect the conversation back to your flaws? That redirection, flipping the script so you end up apologizing to them, is one of the most reliable Dark Empath markers there is. Genuine Heyoka-style honesty tends to build your independence. Dark Empath behavior tends to quietly erode it, one small self-doubt at a time. This distinction matters because it changes how you should respond. If you're dealing with someone whose bluntness comes from a place of genuine care, the right move might be to sit with the discomfort and actually listen. If you're dealing with someone whose insight into you is being used strategically against your interests, the healthiest response is distance and firm boundaries. No amount of, "they just see the real me," justifies being exploited. And if you're not sure yet which one you're dealing with, you can always state the boundary without accusing them of anything. I need us actually to address what happened before we move on. How they respond will usually tell you more than any amount of analyzing ever could. Going back to that overly attentive manager. The boundary might sound like, "I appreciate you checking in. I'd rather talk about workload directly than take on more as a way to say thank you." It's not an accusation, and it doesn't require you to have proven anything about their intent. It just moves things onto ground where a genuinely well-meaning person can easily meet you, and where a self-serving one will often, tellingly, resist. Neither of these labels is a formal clinical diagnosis, but both point to something psychologically real. Emotional insight is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used to build or to harm. The Heyoka framing highlights disruptive honesty in the service of growth. The Dark Empath framing, grounded more directly in Dark Triad research, highlights emotional insight in service of self-interest. Knowing which one you're dealing with isn't about picking a favorite spiritual label. It's about protecting yourself accurately. It's also worth holding these labels loosely rather than turning them into a permanent identity for yourself or anyone else. Most people aren't purely one or the other. Someone can be genuinely growth-oriented with close friends and slip into something more self-serving under stress or when there's power on the line. The value here isn't sorting people into permanent boxes. It's noticing the pattern faster the next time it shows up, including in yourself. If you've ever walked away from someone feeling both exposed and used, this comparison might explain why. The two experiences can feel almost identical in the moment and lead to completely opposite places over time. So pay attention to intent, to whether their honesty ever costs them anything, and to what happens after the uncomfortable moment passes. Let us know in the comments which pattern you've experienced firsthand. And subscribe for more videos breaking down the real psychology behind today's most talked about personality types.